Hey everyone, in this one, let's create an internal tool that takes an Excel workbook and creates a graph using Matplotlib and Pandas. Let's get started. Starting out, let's say that we have some data in an Excel workbook that we'd like to use. We can also use Google Sheets and many other data sources, but in this one, I'll just assume that we have some Excel workbook that we're working with. What we can do now that we have that uploaded over here in our file manager is we can reference it inside of our Python script. So let's pull in a Python module. What we'll do here is write our Python code that interacts with this sample data. Taking a look at this sample data, what we see is just some sample info about a product ID, a movement type, and an amount. So we have goods in and out and the amount that was moved. Also, the product ID, so we know what product was moved. Let's create an overall report of the total movement of those products. To do that, we'll import some Python libraries. So I'll paste those in. We'll be using PyPlot to generate a graph, and we'll use Pandas and NumPy to do some data analysis on the info. Since we're using some Python libraries, we'll need to be sure to go over to our requirements.txt and add the requirements. So we have Matplotlib, Pandas, and NumPy. Starting off, to connect our Excel workbook into our Python script, we'll need to reference it by the path. We'll do this by saying our data frame will be equal to PD. We'll read Excel, and then we'll pass in that file path. For us, since it's in the same layer, all we need is the name of that file. So sample goods movement. And once we run this, we should get a result of our last entries of our Excel workbook. We'll give it a few seconds to run here, and then we should expect a response of those three columns with info inside of them. And we see that's exactly what we get. So we get our last entries. It looks like we have 84 entries and the info about them. Let's say that we need to create two different data frames so we can pass that info on to our teammates. Let's say we need a goods movement in so we can pass that on to our stocking team, and then goods movement out, so maybe we could pass that on to a sales team. We'll say df goods in will just be all the data, and we'll index all that data on the column of movement type, and we'll set that conditional equal to in. What this is saying is go through all of our data, and where our data movement type is equal to in, set that equal to our data frame goods in. What this will do is give us all the entries in the Excel workbook of movement type in, and that's not necessarily what we want. We want all of those grouped together and summed so we have a very concise report we can pass on. To do that, we'll just say goods movement in and assign it to itself. Then we'll use a method called group by, and we'll group by that product ID. Finally, we'll need to assign a method that we apply to all other columns in our data frame. In this case, we already know that our movement type is in, and we're grouping on the product ID. So the only column we have left are the amounts, and for those, let's just do a summation. Now, we'll go down and say print df goods in. And this will give us all the entries in that data frame. And that's exactly what we get. So these were the goods that were moved in using data from the Excel workbook. We can do the same thing with goods out. So let's say df goods out will index all of our data where the movement type is equal to out. We'll say the same thing as above. So goods out will be goods out dot group by product ID, and then we'll do a summation on the amount column. Cool. So now we have two sets of information that we may want to pass on to other people in our company. But now what if we want a simple graph where we can either host it on a simple endpoint using WaveScript, or we could send it off in email reports? Let's do that using this import above Matplotlib. So let's say for our graph, we want total movement, and this is super simple to do with Pandas. All we need for total movement is goods in minus goods out. And it's that simple. We have df goods in minus df goods out. That will give us the total movement. We'll say our chart that we'll create will be this total movement data. we'll want to plot it, and we can do that using a method called plot, and we can assign what kind of plot we want to it. We'll set a chart title. So we'll do that with set title and goods movement totals. Finally, what we don't want to do is just show this chart here because we don't want to come back to WaveScript every day to run this. Instead, let's go ahead and save it as a file, and we can use that file in our file manager and do something with it. So we'll do that with PLT, save figure, and then we'll name it. We'll have an inventory movement.png. Once we run this, we should see this file created over here to the left, and I'll show you a few brief ideas on what we can do with it. We'll execute this script. We see it ran, and then we should see a new file pop up here to the left, which it does, and it's right here. Cool. So at this point, you could do a number of things with that graph. You could create a hosted endpoint. So we could do that with an HTTP trigger and a response, where you just respond with HTML content, which could include this image. And we can do that with an HTML module. So that's a simple setup here. You could send an email, and we can do that with the send email module. And we can include an image here. So that's just a few brief ideas, and I hope this video is helpful to show you how you can create automated reports and then pass them on to your colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please let us know and we'll help you out. Until next time.